Welcome, my rancid runts. Today, we have some crazy shit to talk about. It's all like metal and nuts and black, and like there's bats everywhere. We're going to dig up the bones on these insane films, some from the 80s and some more recent. I'm Rob Pasercha.
I'm Devin Shepard.
And we are Cadaver Dogs. Unfortunately, Dave B. Jacobs couldn't be with us today. He's out, I don't know, sniffing around some other dog bowls or something. But to replace him, we have my good friend and work colleague, Chris Guzzo. How's it going, buddy?
Hey, Rob, how's it going, man? Thank you both, Devin and Rob, for having me on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, for any of you diehard fans, Chris and I used to have our own podcast called From the Crypt. Unfortunately, life got in the way, but now we're here. We're reunited. And I'm really excited. Chris Guzzo actually has a teaser for a series called The Fourth Temptation. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure, Rob. So The Fourth Temptation is going to be an 8-episode TV show. It's going to be horror thriller, and it's based on a book that was created by God to show people their true purpose in life. But then it was cursed by the devil, so now people could only see their true desire. And a lot of bad stuff happens to these different people when they get a hold of this book. So I'm pretty excited about this show. We're going to do this teaser in about a couple of months, try to raise some money to make a short film about it. So I'm very excited because I think it's a great story. And thank you. Thank you for letting me plug it.
No, totally.
No, that's amazing.
I actually read an early draft of the pilot, and yeah, there's some really fucked up shit in there. That's just kind of the signature of Guzman, if like you knew him.
Yeah, I'm really dark in my head. I look like a nice guy, but inside it's really dark in there. So I'm excited.
Right on. So before we get started, please follow us on @CadaverDogsPod at Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can also send us an email at cadaverdogspodcast@gmail.com if you want to give us some sort of recommendations for films to cover or whatnot. So for our first film, Devin Shepard is going to give us the synopsis.
The teens of Mill Basin are angsty. Everything is so unfair. Their parents treat them like kids, and the town won't let their favorite heavy metal band, Black Roses, play a concert. They claim the band's Satan music. The parents hold a town hall where they debate if they should allow the band to play. The mayor comes in to question how this band and its fandom is any different than the parents' own fandom with the Beatles. That gets them, and they allow the band to play if they can come and monitor the show. But the band is much smarter. They come on stage dressed like frickin' George Michael or some saintly shit, and the parents give their blessing. They leave the show to continue. But the second the parents are out the door, all hell breaks loose, and it's a full-on rock show. After the concert, the teenagers have changed and begin their murderous sexual ways. This is especially noticed by their English teacher, Mr. Morehouse, a man so dedicated to his students that he broke up with the love of his life to continue teaching. Fucking weirdo. Mr. Morehouse is hell-bent on saving these kids from becoming demonic murderous children. He must stop the music at all costs. This eventually ends with Mr. Morehouse barging in on the final Black Roses concert and setting the stage on fire. He watches the band burn as they change into their own original demonic selves. And all the children are saved. Thank you, Mr. Morehouse.
So basically, Damien turns into a horny toad at the end.
Damien, yeah, the lead singer, yeah. Of course his name is Damien.
Yeah. And I like how he dresses up like a choir boy, like whenever he talks to Matthew, the English teacher. It's like, where does hair go? I thought he had long hair.
He has so many different forms. Like at one point, he has no hair at all. He's just bald.
The best form is definitely the first scene of the movie when he's just a weird looking fucking Jim Henson abomination.
Oh, it's so good. And you never see it again. It's like when they open and they're all in their full creature makeup.
Yeah, they
right? And
must
like,
have
yeah.
ran out of costume or something. So I got a question for you guys. Chris, have you ever been obsessed with a band, like a metal band or maybe a celebrity or something that to the point where it kind of like changed your ego? Maybe when you were younger, you wanted to like dress a certain way because the music you listened to or something.
So I love heavy metal. I love like Def Leppard and like Judas Priest. I listen to it all the time, even when I'm working out. People listen to rap. I listen to that. I don't think it ever made me want to go out on a killing spree and kill my students or teachers or my parents. But you know what's interesting? I found an article. I don't know if you guys like looked this up, but like the in the 80s, Judas Priest came out with an album, and two kids listened to it and committed suicide. One successfully committed suicide, and the other one, like I think he shot his face off, and then like died a couple of years later. And they tried to sue Judas Priest, saying that it was satanic heavy metal that caused it because they were listening to it.
It sounds very similar to like what happened with Nirvana too, right? Like the exact same thing happened with Nirvana, where I think the first kid or the one that like really stood out actually mentioned Nirvana in his suicide note. Did these kids mention, why do they think it's Judas Priest?
It was off the Stained Class album.
Mm.
And they were saying that they were like hidden subliminal messages that it claimed that they were including phrases like "Let's be dead and do it." It says "Let's be dead and do it," which he labeled an invasion of privacy.
Mm.
So I don't know. This happened in 1985. This whole
Mm.
situation. So I'm curious if this movie Black Roses was kind of inspired by this situation. I mean, there were many of them during the 80s, and like they were saying that it caused a lot of violence in kids listening to them. But I wonder if this particular article about Judas Priest actually inspired this movie.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think a lot of things that were happening in the 80s inspired this movie. I mean, the biggest thing I saw, so when the parents are having their town hall, I think it's one of the teachers who actually is the woman from The Creature from the Black Lagoon.
I saw that. That's
She's
awesome.
Yeah, that's so cool. But she goes up and starts reciting or like reading lyrics and saying these are demonic lyrics. And that's exactly what happened in the trials from Tipper Gore's whole movement against lyrics in music. Do you guys know about this?
No, I never heard of this.
No.
So, Tipper Gore, who is Al Gore's wife, started the PMRC in the 80s, which was Parent Music Resource Center, something like that. And it was essentially the same thing. It was like censorship for music. And eventually they brought it to the Supreme Court, and it led to the actual like parent advisory stickers that you now see on CDs, because they said these lyrics are too much for our children to handle.
Mm. I was so devastated when I was like 12 years old and I couldn't buy a Korn CD.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the band Korn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because
yeah,
it
I
had
love
the sticker
Korn.
on it.
Yeah. And then like I was all sad, and then my aunt was like, "What? I'll buy it for you." And she just went in and bought it for me, and I was like, "Oh, you're the best."
The more and more we learn about Rob's family is just they're cool.
yeah, kind of. I don't know. When I was like 12 years old, I was like a little nerdy nerd, and I was like, "Listen, I don't want to be a nerd anymore." So I started wearing all black and just like listening to metal music, and I stopped brushing my hair, so my hair just kind of turned into like this like bird's nest thing, and I would
I
wear
can see
like
that.
and I would wear like those fucking studded bracelets and shit, and I was just like this skinny
Oh my
little
God.
12-year-old. Yeah,
Oh, you were 12? I feel like
I was like
my
12.
hardcore
Yeah.
phase was like 16, 17, got really into 80s metal.
Did you ever like sacrifice animals? I never did that.
Not animals.
Yeah.
No.
Humans.
Yeah,
A couple of humans. It never hurt
You know,
nobody.
some
sacrifice
babies.
a few
22.
ex-boyfriends. Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, I wish.
You know what this movie reminded me of? It was like a satanic Footloose. Like
Yes. Oh my
especially the first
God.
Yeah, it
30
really
minutes of it,
was.
right?
Yeah.
Like the
Yeah.
townspeople were against this music, and they're like, "Come on, let them play." Only the ending was much different than the Footloose movie, and we didn't have Kevin Bacon dancing. So
Yeah, it was interesting because this movie took the stance of like it's commentating on this, but they do in the end, the music is actually demonic, and it does actually make the teenagers murder people. And we do root for this teacher to stop the show and to save the kids.
the guy who looks like Tom Selleck.
So much. Oh, that mustache.
He was like knockoff Tom Selleck running around. And where did he get the dynamite at the end? Was that?
I don't know.
He just
That
kind of
was
like pulled it
was it
out.
a flare or was that a piece of dynamite that
I don't
he
know.
grabbed?
It looked like a stick of dynamite, but it exploded like a flare, and then it apparently did nothing to Damien. He just like danced.
I was saying the
Yeah.
same thing. I was watching. I was like, what is this? He just has this stick out of nowhere. He lights it, and fire goes in front of Damien, but nothing really happens other than that.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
do they burn? I mean, obviously they don't burn down because then they go to New York to play more shows, which, like, classic ending there. You know, the show must continue and we must destroy the rest of the world.
Not only that, it's Madison Square Garden, so it's just going to be like way worse than it was in this small town in the middle of nowhere.
Which Mill Basin is in Brooklyn, but I don't. They filmed this in Canada, so I'm not sure if like this is supposed to be Brooklyn because I don't think it really. I've never been to Mill Basin though.
Oh, I thought it was like a small town. It's in
It
Brooklyn.
definitely looked like a small town.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. It looked like a Critters setting type of town. You know, like that small town.
I did get like serious Critter vibes from this movie.
Did you? I did the same. I felt the
Yeah.
same way. I was like
Yeah.
this '80s Critters sci-fi vibe, which wasn't supposed to be in the movie, but somehow it was there.
Well, yeah, because I think like the puppeteering and stuff is kind of similar in the costumes, just
Right.
like the aesthetically. I also like how Big Pussy's in the movie.
Oh,
Yeah,
stole it.
yeah.
That's the best part of the movie.
Yes, he's like, fungul. And then he gets eaten by a speaker. He's like, what the fuck?
Okay,
Yeah, he gets sucked into it, right?
Yeah,
he gets
yeah,
sucked
yeah.
into
Yeah.
the speaker.
Yeah.
It was so cool, but it was so. We were watching. I was watching it with my boyfriend, and we were like so confused because it's the first kill,
Mhm.
and it's the hand coming out of the speaker, and we're like, "Is this how? Like the music is legit killing him? Is this how all the other deaths are going to happen?" And then it never happens again. It's just that one scene, and he's only in it. Like he's not in any other scene. He's just in that scene to die.
Mhm. I wonder if he used that on his reel when he was like auditioning for Sopranos.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
he probably did that role for like $300. If you got him in 2022, that role would be like $15,000-$20,000, definitely. And
It's a
I wonder
great
if they
role.
even used him. They probably used. Do you think because it was so low budget, they actually sucked his leg through the speaker, or you think it was like a stuntman that did it?
I bet you that was like a puppet that at the end was getting sucked through or something. That
Right.
had to
Oh
be a
no, he
stunt
did
guy.
it. He fully
You
did
think,
it.
it did?
Oh yeah.
I mean, they definitely had some sort of puppet budget because the puppets look pretty cool, especially when that chick at the end who's trying to come on to Matthew, she turns into that weird like long necked thing. That
Right.
was
Oh my
cool.
God.
Although when he killed her, it was super lame. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was pretty lame. But
I thought it was no. I was just gonna say in that scene, when she's coming on to him, like she's about to like go down on him, and he kind of flicks her away with his hand, and I laughed at that point. I was like, "What is this?" Like
He
the
smacks
way
her,
he smacks her, and then she turns into this monster.
yeah,
I was just curious about the monster effects, like with the puppets. Back to what you were saying in the beginning, like why did they never go back to the original makeup from the opening? Why was it a completely different monster or morph at the end? Like it went from you said he looked like a frog. I thought he looked like a dinosaur at the end. I
Yeah.
thought we were watching Land of the Lost at the end of
Yeah.
it, but I don't know. The demon, the way he looked in the beginning was so good, and then they never went back to that again.
I know. And I like story wise, I don't have an answer for you because they definitely should have brought that back. But when I was doing research on behind the scenes, I think it was a makeup thing that they just apparently that was a high point of tension for them that makeup took a very, very
Okay.
long time and they just
Mhm.
didn't have the time that they wanted with it, unfortunately.
Right.
But it's
That
so
makes a lot of
cool.
sense. It is really cool. And I also like the music a lot in this movie. They had a lot of great bands playing for them, like King Cobra and Tempest, and a lot of other, at the time, icons of metal just come in and do little small parts. It's an interesting film because it's like the heyday of Troma. Like this is a Troma movie, and it's when Troma
Yeah.
actually had like some sort of integrity and their movies are watchable. You know, like it still has that ridiculous Troma vibe of like, wow, people don't really act like this in the real world, and it's silly and it's overacted. And you got a little kid, a high school guy running around saying he's gonna paint the town red.
A high school guy that's played by a guy who literally looks like he's 30.
Oh yeah,
The funniest thing in the movie, he looks so old. He
He's
has
actually
bags under his eyes.
the actor's 27 years old while
Okay,
he's,
so
he's in
essentially
this movie.
30.
But you're right, yeah, 30.
Yeah.
They all look so old. They're like, it's not. I thought maybe it was college in the beginning, and I was like, no, it's not. It's high
No.
school.
Yeah, but all those old movies are like that. You go back and watch the original Carrie, it's like they're not.
I know.
Right.
It's just funny to, especially this guy looks so tired, like he's been up all night drinking, which I guess works for the teen role. But then he complains, he like whines like he's 13 years old. I'm like, that doesn't compute. That doesn't work.
So I also noticed there was a lot of filler in this movie,
Right.
and some of it was just like boobs. Like there was a scene where a girl is just. They obviously used a different actress because they didn't show her head, and they had a picture of her head on the the mirror, and she just pulls down her top and massages her breasts for like a minute straight. And I was like, wow, that's cool. Where's this going? And then she just puts it up and walks away, and that's the end of the scene. The whole scene is.
Rob, I said the same thing last night. I was watching it with my girlfriend. I was like, this is the complete unnecessary boob scene in this film. And it goes nowhere. And frankly, I think films today need more of those kind of scenes where there's no conflict, there's nothing. It's just boobs.
It's just boobs.
It's just boobs. We definitely don't have enough.
Yeah, I do appreciate that scene though, because she is masturbating. So you do get female masturbation, which is like not really something that you see a lot during this time, I feel.
Right. Did you notice her hands in the movie? I don't know if they put makeup on it or it was just like an older actress, but I thought that they kind of looked older and maybe possibly demonic. And I was like surprised that they didn't show the head before that. They just showed you from neck down, which was cool. But I was curious to see if like the hands were going to match what the face looked like.
So that's just like the meme of the Kardashians' hands I've been seeing going around. You seen that? She's there's a meme of one of the Kardashians. She's sitting in her car and she has those fucking demon hands. And they like zoom in on it. They're like, what the hell's going on with their hands?
Oh, it's like Paris Hilton's like thumb, her toe thumb. You remember that?
She's a toe thumb? I don't know.
Oh no, that's Megan. What's her
Fox?
face from Jennifer's Body? Yeah. She
yeah,
has
Megan
a toe
Fox
thumb.
has a toe thumb?
Oof.
Yeah.
Oh.
That was like an obsession that people had. I don't know. But no, I noticed that too, Chris. And I was like, because it's very obviously, like Rob said, it's very obviously a body double. And that bothered me because I noticed the hands, but then also we do later get a shot of the actual actress's top. She's topless and the nipples do not match.
Right.
They're completely different colors. I'm like, you guys can try a little bit harder here. It's very, very, very obvious.
Yeah, what was up with that? It's just like, because when we see her topless anyway, maybe she was like, I'm not going to go topless. So like, fine, I'll just get someone else.
Probably. Or, yeah. Maybe they only had her for a couple of shooting days, or like her contract was only one boob scene. And then they needed to add another one because the producers looked at it and said, not enough boobs.
Yeah.
Yeah. The whole movie really sexualizes teenagers in a way that, like, yes, teenagers have sex. Like, we're not ignoring that point. I think it's more of like their relationships with adults. Because like you guys were saying, the now I forget her name, which I feel so bad, woman that we were talking about that does strip down and eventually like hits on her teacher. But they have that kind of relationship set up already. Like they spend a lot of special time together. She calls him her best friend, and he definitely like thinks of her sexually, right? That's there.
Well, it was really weird when he just shows up to her parents' house to find her. Like, what the fuck? I mean, I guess it's the 80s, so it was like the line between student-teacher relationship was less strict than it is now. So, like,
sure,
there
but it's
were
still
friendships.
Like,
yeah. But I mean, maybe it's 80s or maybe it's earlier, but back in the day, it wasn't uncommon for a teacher to, like, take a kid to the fair or something, like if they're having trouble in school, like they were allowed to kind of have these types of like parental relationships, which sometimes were probably innocent, but obviously a lot of times they weren't. So now we're not allowed to have those anymore. But
okay, that's all
yeah,
fair
you're
and
right.
good.
It's definitely
but
creepy in a movie.
yeah,
I have a question, and this bothered me throughout the whole movie because this is the protagonist, Mr. Mustache over there. Why did he have a picture of him and his students on his wall? That creeped me out. Like I don't know if there was subtext about him having like an affair with his students. There was no resolution with it, but there was a lot of like hidden Easter eggs throughout. This movie, like, it was only an hour and 23 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was an 80s horror movie for fun. But I would like to see this movie actually be remade today with like those elements in it would be more interesting. You know, if this guy who was the protagonist did have this kind of dark secret with his students that like is developed throughout the movie, and like if you showed like more realistic relationships between the students and the parents and the student and the teacher, and then have this bad evil like come into town and like kind of like stray them away. I just think that it would be like a cool movie to watch today, especially with the effects.
No, I agree. I think it would be cool. I wonder if we can do a modern day remake, what would replace metal music? Like, would it be
Country,
like
country.
It would either be country or like mumble rap, I guess.
or I mean, I guess there was a concert where kids got so wild and things got so crazy that a lot of people died. I forget who was hosting that one.
Oh yeah, that just happened.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that one.
Yeah, where the people got trampled.
So sad. Yeah, this teacher. Yeah, I agree. I don't really find him realistic in today's standards. Just his obsession with his kids. I mean, his girlfriend literally says, "You're too obsessed with your kid. Like you want to do good things and be a good teacher, and I just don't understand it." And she's just so vapid. I don't understand her character at all. She gets mad at him for caring.
No, the characters in this movie were very one dimensional or two dimensional. It was a horror movie. Like I went into this, I had no expectations, especially when Troma came on the screen before it started. Did you guys think that like it had this movie been made a couple of years later when Troma was really like unapologetic with the way they made movies, that it would have been a better movie with like that X-rated graphic violence? That Troma, like the Toxic Avenger look.
What this wasn't. When was Toxic Avenger made though?
In '85. I don't know if Troma actually. It said it was presented by it, so I don't know if they gave funding or because then they don't have their names at all afterwards.
Yeah, it's like a Frankenhooker situation where they distributed it, I think.
Okay.
I don't think it's straight from Troma because we don't get that like Class of Nukem High Toxic Avenger thing.
Right.
Although we get like kind of like hints towards it.
Right.
So yeah, I actually almost think if it was made maybe like 2 years earlier by Troma themselves, it would have been really good. But if we go like 4 or 5 years later by Troma, it would probably be awful because their movies just kind of weren't good anymore after a little while.
Right.
This also like it technically it was a big budget movie. I think it ended up being like almost $1 million in American money.
Really?
I guess I should say US dollars. That is the currency.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually a pretty big budget, which is unfortunate because like we were just saying, there were obvious, effects on the special effects makeup and that we couldn't get the whole band for longer. So that sucks.
Yeah, I still I enjoyed a lot of the silliness.
I think the movie's definitely silly, but I think it definitely is saying a lot. And I think it is a lot deeper. And yeah, the characters are one dimensional. And like, yeah, it's kind of an obvious thread to pull on in 1988 when all this stuff with music is happening and you literally are like recreating it in your film space. But I thought what was really interesting was the hypocrisy that was pointed out throughout the film. I mean, the mayor says it in the beginning to the parents. He says what I said in my summary, which is, you acted the same way when the Beatles came. Everyone thought that was sexual. When Elvis came and he shook his hips, like everyone was like, oh, that's horrendous. He's, a sexual demon. And now this is happening again with metal music. So obviously the parents are hypocrites and they're like punishing the children for what? It's interesting to bring up and to debate in a film space, especially one that is as silly as Black Roses.
Yeah, I like how it's just an unapologetic like satire, really over the top. And it's like, oh, you really think it's devil music? Well, maybe it would be like this, where they all just turn to skeletons and frogs and whatnot.
The ending is bleak, right? It kind of has that Invasion of the Body Snatchers kind of ending because like nothing is really settled. Like, they burn them, the kids come out, but who knows what happens? The parents are all still dead, right?
Yeah.
So we don't know what's going to happen to all the kids. And like the last shot is a television screen showing that they're going to play at Madison Square Garden. So like, they prevailed. So evil prevailed at the end of this film.
Yeah, I love that ending.
Yeah.
So this is a good place to pick up our second film. When a milkshake collides with a moving vehicle, smearing chocolatey froth all over the hood, 3 young women seek revenge. Well, not really. Meet Alexis, Val, and Beverly, 3 metalheads on their way to a concert in Indiana. The year is 1988 when metal bands still sang at higher octaves. Enjoying the show, they link up with Mark, Ivan, and Kovacs, a trio of band members enjoying their last show together as a group. After a quick powwow, the girls turn down the boys' invitation to chill in the van and instead venture to Beverly's parents' house. But strange things happen in the middle of Indiana, and the boys find themselves drugged, bound, and at knife point to 3 Jesus-crazy cult members. See, the girls were lying. They don't like metal or Satan. They like Jesus, and Jesus is their one and only. And killing these boys will bring them more people into their congregation, run by Beverly's father and original jackass himself, Johnny Knoxville. Believe me, it makes sense or something. Ivan is bled, a stepmother does coke, Val is terrible at opening doors, and Alexis has an upside-down leaf blower. Welcome to We Summon the Darkness, the 2019 horror thriller directed by Mark Myers and written by Alan Treza.
Nice. So what the fuck? There's so many twists in this movie, first of all, which I love and I appreciate. But the end, can we talk about the end when the pastor comes home and goes to his daughter? You had him switch in the summary. It's Alexis is the daughter and Beverly's the runaway or the whatever they call her. Yeah.
No
But he
way.
comes home and you find out that the pastor is in on it and he kills Kovacs and then goes to his daughter and he tries to kill her and then says, "You're going to like take the blame for this so that we can continue being the good people that we are." Does this make sense to you? Like, what is his plan? What is he trying to do here?
Chris, do you want to answer that? I don't think it makes any sense at all.
I think that I enjoyed this movie for what it was. It was enjoyable because of the characters. I like the 3 girls in it, but this movie was heavily, heavily flawed. There was so many plot holes in this movie and dumb decision makings. And I don't know if it was supposed to be because it was supposed to be partially comedy or not, but it didn't make any sense. Why would a pastor have his daughter commit murder in his own house? Made no sense to me, and like everything that could go wrong, and then not telling the mom and not having the mom in it. I felt like it was plot convenience to just have it at this house so the pastor could come at the end and just have the third act play out. But other than that, like logically, it made no sense. I mean, why wouldn't, even if the pastor wanted his daughter to commit the murder to like further his congregation, why wouldn't you do it in somebody else's house? Why wouldn't you do it somewhere else? Why would you do it in your own house where like all this stuff could go wrong?
And everything does go wrong.
Right.
Yeah. So it all, I think, went according to Johnny Knoxville's ridiculous plan. But his plan was that the FBI or whatever is looking at him for these murders and they suspect him. So for him to get the heat off it, but also vindicate their like evidence, was to just put all the blame on his daughter.
Right. Well,
But
you
that's
got
like dumb.
you got to understand, Johnny Knoxville just did Jackass Forever, and the bull hit him, and he suffered a lot of brain damage after that. So you got to give him an excuse for this logical plan that's played out in this movie.
Yeah, he also got punched in the face by Butterbean, who might be the hardest hitting boxer ever. I mean,
That's a great
Jesus
name,
Christ.
Butterbean.
How do you get him on a movie like this? Like, what kind of deals do you gotta like mix and manage to get Johnny Knoxville to come play the evangelist in this film?
It's such a weird casting choice, but I love it so much.
It works for this movie.
Yeah.
I love him. I don't know. He's just very charismatic. He's like one of those people that like, it's just star power. Like if I see Johnny Knoxville, like as soon as I saw it, I looked up this movie before I watched it. I was like, oh, Johnny Knoxville's in it. I got to watch this movie. And I wondered what kind of character he's going to play. And it made, it was a good marketing gimmick to get me to watch it.
Not Alexandra Daddario.
I thought he looked pretty good as the pastor.
She was great too. She was great, and like I guess like that reverse role. I read reviews about this movie, and like people didn't like her playing this bad girl, but I loved it. That was my favorite dynamic, was the dialogue between her and the other 2 girls. Was probably the strong point, the strong suit of this film.
Yeah.
This film, like, if it got a couple of like more rewrites and like they kind of like got rid of the plot holes that are in it, it could have been like a really strong Scream type movie, because that's what it was going for, and then it just fell apart because of all the stupid decisions.
Yeah, Scream is a really good comp. I totally agree with you. I loved the 3 characters, the 3 female characters. I love the 3 guy characters too, actually. But they were so much fun. My favorite nuance in this film
Mhm.
was having these, I guess, well, two of them are very extremely religious / brainwashed, but showing these women that, you know, have a relationship with God and are religious, but still are sexual, and not have that, like, the killing is a little contradictory to their belief system, but I think like allowing them to be sexual and allowing that, I liked that nuance. I like that take on it.
I love how religion though plays, and it kind of shows how religion is evil. You know what I mean? How over time, over years, like what we've done for religion, like we've killed, and like, you know,
Mhm.
that kind of cult mentality of like you think you're doing the right thing, but you're really causing these horrible acts.
Mm.
Especially TV evangelists, right? Especially during this time. It's funny because I was just, did you guys watch that movie, The Eyes of Tammy Faye?
No.
No, I never seen
It's
it.
not a horror
No.
film, so I
Oh, it's
didn't
not? No.
expect you to.
Okay.
But it's about these two evangelists, TV evangelists, actually around this time in the
Mhm.
80s, who did essentially what the pastor is doing. It's Tammy and Jim Baker, and Jim Baker was the head of the operation and would
Mm.
go on TV and basically ask people to donate money to the church and then use the money to pay for this extravagant lifestyle, which we see happen in this film.
Mm. Yeah, that's pretty common. There was also a cult leader who I think he still lives in Mexico. He was taking the donations of like clothes and just selling them, and he made like $1 billion doing that.
On
Like
clothes?
like clothing drops, yeah. Like people would donate clothes in those clothing drops, and he would like resell them instead of giving them away like you're supposed to. And he just made insane amounts of money. And he has like a cult. Yeah, I think it kind of speaks to just like the overall kind of like hypocrisies in particularly Christianity, but religion as a whole. You know, like historically, if we go back to like things like the Inquisition or the Crusades, there are all these ideas that they're allowed to do all this evil, but the end justifies the means. Whereas, how many actual satanic groups around were there? I mean, there were probably a handful, but most of them didn't like delve deep into American history and really cause a lot of havoc. I mean, unless you want to argue that Adolf Hitler's obsession with like occult stuff was kind of Satanism, which like my grandma did. But most people would argue that Nazis were more or less Christians, just really bad ones. So it's kind of funny to juxtapose this idea of like the hypocrisy of religious groups damning satanic groups, although there are very few of them, if any at all. And it's really the religious groups doing all the Satan type stuff, which is the bad things.
Right, because I don't think that I think saying that there's a bunch of satanic groups out there doing things is playing into the satanic panic of the 80s. Like
Yeah.
these people were kind of making this stuff up and blaming it on satanic groups, which like we don't even know if like there were satanic groups doing anything. And I think they show a little bit of this in the movie. Who's the tall guy? Taylor Swift's brother?
The guy who gets killed.
The first guy who gets killed.
Oh, Ivan. Yeah. And that's her brother. Wow.
Yeah, Taylor Swift's brother.
Wow.
Crazy, right? He wears a pentagram, and Alexis, Alexandra Daddario's character, goes up to him and says, "You know, what is this for? What does this stand for to you?" And he says, "This is against people like you." And it's essentially like this idea that actual, you know, modern day Satanists have, which is it's going against the church. It's like it's standing up against like this ultra conservative lifestyle, and it's not a religion, it's not a church, it's a what is it called, a rebellious middle finger kind of group, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. They're really just anti-establishment.
Yeah.
Tarians, kind of. Yeah. Which is, it's so interesting because they're different than the actual Church of Satan, which has been
Right.
around since I think like the 70s or so. Really not that long. But that's like the church that Marilyn Manson was a minister in and shit. That's a different thing than the current Satanists you're talking about. That's a different
Yes.
organization. Yeah.
Yes. That's actually a yeah.
They're I mean, I don't know if they're like strict Satanists in like the traditional sense either, but the group you're talking about are the ones who are like, hey, let's have a statue of Baphomet if you're allowed to have another religious statue, like why not? And they do things like that. It's kind of, you know, to point out the hypocrisies of the not quite clear distinction between church and state.
Right. The Satanic Temple. That's what they are.
Yeah, yeah, different than the Church of Satan. FYI.
I have a question. Johnny Knoxville's character caused his daughter and the friends to commit this horrible act in the name of Satan and make it, you know, set it up. Wouldn't that hurt his church? Or would it work as like in the movie and people would be like, "Oh, I feel bad for this guy. I'm going to give more money to this church." I kind of question like what the whole logic is this entire film.
Well, I think I'm with Devin here, and he's trying to play into the satanic panic, and he's like, even my family's not safe. You all need to be aware. I think that's really his aim.
Yeah, that makes sense to
I
me.
guess so.
It's definitely playing a ultimate I'm innocent card. I think if you have someone that close to no, because if you have someone that close to you, I feel like people have to question, especially during this time, they question your parentship or your leadership. Like it's his own daughter, right?
Hmm.
Like what did they say?
Yeah, well, they should, but so like Jim Jones, for instance, people were like exalting him as this divine kind of leader, but the guy was cheating on his wife. He had custody battles and all these other things. Like, we know throughout history that these people become larger than life, holier than thou, are able to get away with a lot of things to their devout followers because their devout followers have become fanatic. And it's this idea of like, do what I say, don't do what I do, that a lot of leaders just kind of run away with.
That's fair. I like that. Yeah, because even the guy that I was talking about, Jim Baker, also Jim. Weird. He a lot of gyms, a lot of gym leaders.
Don't trust Jim.
He had a sexual relationship. I don't want to say sexual relationship. He raped the woman, but that happened and went to court around, I think it was 85 to 87. So this movie takes place in 88. So around this time too, where they started questioning leadership.
Yeah. So why didn't the cop call for backup?
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been driving me crazy, Rob. Why? Why? As soon as he got there, why didn't he call for backup? There's so many illogical things in this movie that drove me nuts.
I mean, I get it. He's like 8 feet tall. So he's like, oh, I just got to take care of these little girls. But then he sees dead bodies everywhere. So it's the 80s. Like, do they not have a walkie on their person? Is it only in the
I
car?
don't know.
It did. I don't know.
I guess so in Indiana. I don't know. Like, maybe it's the nuances. It's before cell phones. Although there are car phones, obviously, because the stepmother calls the cops from her car.
Why didn't he have a partner with him when
Oh,
he?
yeah. But I think in a rural area, the cops are going to go out on their own. Even now, cops travel on their own sometimes. To 911 calls, they do. Even in Jersey.
The kid at the end points the gun at Johnny Knoxville and hands over the gun to Johnny Knoxville and then questions who he was before asking. He should have asked him first before giving him the gun, and then Johnny Knoxville shoots him. Another thing was the mother. She was stepmom or regular
Stepmom,
mother.
yeah.
She was regular
Stepmom.
Stepmom comes into the house, and obviously the two guys had to hear somebody come in. Why wouldn't they scream for help?
Yeah. Okay. That last point, you're definitely spot on. The other two, I can hand wave with some really stupid movie logic. So,
Okay.
all right. So he gave him the gun because he was losing blood and his brain was dying. Fair enough. You're not going to do things well. Stepmother's all coked up, so she's just making bad decisions. What was really dumb, but I kind of like it, was how Johnny Knoxville was eating cookies when he came home. And you're like, dude, like shit's going down. Wouldn't you be nervous? And you're like, okay,
He
I
put
guess.
his hand in the cookie jar. He
Yeah.
stuck his hand in the cookie jar. What a great image there.
I feel like this was just a bunch of like celebrities who are like, let's just make a movie together. Let's make a horror movie. I want to do it. That's why like Amy Forsythe's in it.
No.
Who's like, yeah, no, I think so. I like it. I think it's fun. But
No, because the director, what else did he do? He did My Friend Dahmer
right.
before this.
Yeah, and this I think is loosely based on some actual cult leaders of the time, probably, right? Satanic Panic or no?
Well, no, I think it's based in theory. I don't think this actually,
Yeah.
none of it actually happened. I think it very much plays against the fears of what was happening at the time, but it also plays against the fears of what's happening now. Like at that time, the public was scared that there were actually Satanist leaders killing people, which very unlikely did not happen. And now we're like scared that it's actually the religious leaders that are doing these things. For me, it's really smart to take our modern lens and look at 1988 again. I mean, if we want to compare the two movies, the coolest thing is that this movie, We Summon the Darkness, takes place the same year that Black Roses was actually made. And they're kind of talking about the same thing.
Yeah, I think they really are. And I think they both do a similar thing, how they flip the script. So like Black Roses is like, oh, you think this is how it really is? And then they do the satire thing to show a very exaggerated version of like the ridiculous thing they're showing. But then
Right.
this other movie, We Summon the Darkness, is like, well, actually, you were gaslighting satanic groups for your own crimes.
Right, I agree with you. This movie is a little bit opposite the other one because it kind of shows the innocence of satanic, like I mean not satanic, heavy metal.
Mm-hmm.
That there's really nothing wrong, and they're using it as an excuse to gaslight so they can make more money in their congregation and kill these people. What a
I know.
sick people, huh? Johnny Knoxville. How many hits to the head did he have to formulate this plan?
Yeah. Plot twist: he was actually Jackass going back in time to become the pastor, and that's why he had such a
He doesn't need to go
silly
back in
idea.
time. He's that old.
Yeah. So, oh yeah. So I was super disappointed that the three girls weren't actually metalheads. I was like, oh, three hot chick metalheads. And it's like, oh no, that's a pipe dream. All together. It's like if you ever go to like a metal show, there's like usually like one good looking girl like running around.
No, I can tell. Obviously, Alexis didn't know what the hell she was talking about because she couldn't remember her first concert. I can't tell if Val actually was a fan or just researched really well. And then Beverly, too. I think Beverly, I can't tell if she researched really well or actually knew the bands.
I think they were actually kind of fans, and then they like were recent converts or something. Val in particular. Alexis, as you pointed out, was definitely like paper thin. She didn't do her
Yeah.
research. Well, definitely the strongest suit of points of the movie are the acting and the character interactions, as silly as they are. I think the characters themselves are well written, although they make bad decisions.
Yeah.
Like Val's hilarious every time she has to go pee.
Oh my
That
God,
was
she has
so
to
funny.
pee so much. I love it.
I know. Yeah. So like I think that is kind of like Tarantino-esque, how they take like this genre piece, but then they're like, hey, let's write good dialogue in it and try to like beef it up to an A-quality movie. But then it had such a silly plot. It's like, all right, is it really that? A point of comparison I want to make is the lack thereof and the excess of their boobies in these movies.
But I mean,
What a
should there have
bummer.
been? These are religious women, and despite what I was saying earlier, like they're sexual, but I don't think they're gonna just flash their tits around the house to strangers.
So Chris and I were theory crafting on this, and we each came up with ideas of how they're going to show their boobs and still maintain their chastities or religious vows.
Thank you for leaving me out of this conversation.
Right? So I was thinking we could just go like the silly like horror movie trope where her shirt gets ripped and she has to run around the house. But Chris had some ideas.
Well, easily you could have just had, after the blood, you could have just shown her in the shower washing the blood off, one of them, and you could have had a boob scene. You could have had Val, who wanted to have sex with one of them because she was promiscuous.
That one makes sense.
And you could see her take her shirt off, but doesn't end up doing it. And it could give a little backstory of like the way she was before she came to the congregation.
Oh, and Johnny Knoxville could have had a girl with him.
Oh God. But I think in the spirit of the film, it would make actually more sense to have male nudity.
Yes.
Because it is a modern film. So I think, and it is a feminist movie. I think they do very strong female characters that are very complex. It would make more sense to me if, I guess, one of the guys, there would be male nudity somewhere. Maybe his pants get ripped. Look, I love what we've come to. We've had so much female nudity for so long. It's time the penis has its day.
Yeah, I'm all for nudity of both genders.
Me too.
So there should have been ball shots and boob shots of a plethora. The kid could have even done the "you want some gum" thing, and then he pulled his ball sack out.
No, Rob.
There you go.
No, David, come back.
So definitely Downer Debbie movies. You'd think that both of them being kind of like funny and silly and stuff, they wouldn't have such like downer endings, but we really don't have that much hope for anybody. Like the masses are just going to continue being duped and thinking they're satanic cults. Johnny Knoxville gets away scot-free, and in Black Roses, the band is going to play Madison Square Garden and more or less bring on the apocalypse. Like the children of the corn are going to rise up and fucking kill everybody.
Yeah. I think it's a good ending, though, that these both have, because these issues are still happening. I keep bringing this up, but in Black Roses, we're going to have that generational divide every generation. Like there's going to be something that the next generation does that we don't see, or the conservative adult generation is going to see as, not okay or quote satanic. And we still have these issues with religion, like in We Summon the Darkness is saying, like there are still leaders out there and they're still doing bad things. It's you can't have a good ending because the world is not a good place.
Yeah, it's kind of weird how both these films are so exaggerated, yet I mean, I don't want to say have realistic endings, but yeah, they don't really pull punches at the end, which I appreciate. I like the crazy horror movie ending.
Dang. Okay, usually this is the part where, Rob, you were going to say that this is your favorite part and we are going to move on to bone reviews, but We actually are losing Chris. So we actually have to wrap up the recording and just say goodbye, unfortunately. However, we will be posting our bone reviews on our social media pages. So if you go over to our Instagram at CadaverDogsPod or over to our Twitter at CadaverDogsPod, you'll be able to see how we rated these films 1 to 4 bones.
So, all right, my ranted runts, go back to your doggy bowls, and I'm glad you enjoyed this episode. Till next time.
I'm the wrath of God.
I have to pee again.
Did that one work? Oh, God.